Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Newsmakers Podcast. This is Kyle Gargaro, Editorial Director of the ACHR News. Today, we're talking with John Dugan, who is a CEO at Liberty Supply, and Patrick Carter, who is a Chief Revenue Officer at that supply house. They are an HVAC distributor focused on hydronic heating and cooling systems for the commercial market. It is also a distributor that launched during COVID, so I'm kind of interested in hearing their story here. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you launched your company in June of this year. Kind of walk me through the process and how long was this in the making?
We came from a different supply house here in the cities where we had a sort of diverging vision of what we wanted to accomplish, given the changing dynamics in the industry of distribution. We've been focused on the HVAC side, primarily for commercial facilities. And so the hydronic pumps and systems, the valves and controls, everything that you would say, Kyle, is in the line in a facility. So we've seen a lot of changing dynamics through this process of the pandemic. We think there's a lot that accelerated in terms of how distributors need to adapt to a changing landscape. It's not a temporary thing. It's something that is going to be a pivot point in the timeline of how distributors need to be thinking about their business into the future.
All right, well, let's start there. How has COVID changed the way the distribution should be servicing the contractor?
Supply is tight, and our view here at Liberty Supply is that those issues around supply chain, those delays, those containers being backed up, the lack of staff at the ports, that we try at all costs to mitigate those delays. And that means a lot of different things. That means building up a redundancy in our supply chain so we're not levered to one particular supplier or one particular distribution facility. Patrick and I have spent a lot of time scouring the country to line up a redundancy so that we come to understand how certain suppliers, certain reps and manufacturers go to market and build relationships with them so that when we do get that inquiry, that we're able to understand from our end how to work our way through the supply chain in a way that's focused on delivering as fast as possible.
Yeah, because the thought I had too is in a pandemic and with the supply chain issues, the whole industries that are going, I figured sometimes the manufacturers were gonna take care of first the bigger suppliers that have been around for a while, and you guys are kind of new guys on the block. Did that become an issue, or was there a workaround?
Yeah. Is that an issue for us? Maybe. Right. What we wanted to do was kind of look at it from the customer's perspective. So what we know on our side of the business is that we're in a needs business, right? And for us, like John mentioned, is to get that redundancy. So let's say there's a major manufacturer, a major brand out there that is allocating the products that are coming in off the containers to a specific customer. That's okay, all right? We know where we are in our business. So having that redundancy, we can go to supplier 2, supplier 3, supplier 4, supplier 5. And that has been what's really worked well for us. We have a lot of customer cases where that redundancy has helped us. Certainly in a market where what seems to be today, where the 12 to 14 week lead time is now the norm, if we can convert within a week, customers are very thankful. They're very appreciative of that effort. It's a lot of curiosity is what's winning for us too. And what I mean by that is, let's say the norm is the 12 to 14 weeks. Well, what can we do differently, right? We've got to ask the right questions. We've got to hold our suppliers accountable on what they commit to, and then obviously be able to translate that to the end user.
And if I can pick up on something, Kyle, there too, It's a great question. And of course, the economics favor a larger distributor. But what we've come to recognize through just a number of calls is that the relationships really matter. People do business with people. And these employees at these manufacturers want to do best by the brand that they represent. And when we talk to them, they recognize that we want to do best by our customer. So there's alignment there. There's a key alignment when they see a company like Liberty Supply, who really is predicating our business on 3 pillars of knowledge, communication, and speed. They understand that that's a very customer-centric business, and we found that they really gravitate towards doing business with us. And I think on both sides of the table, it's holding each other accountable and keeping an open dialogue and being honest. And the intent that we have as an organization has been a large benefit for us, that intent to be really customer-centric.
Okay, great. Do you see, as far as product availability, do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? It feels like contractors slogged through 2020, right? Because they had a tough summer, and they said, well, it's probably get better after the first of the year. And then through the winter, it feels like the goal line keeps on getting pushed back, but maybe it's just nobody knows the answer.
Yeah, I'll attack it from the customer side, right? So we have, it's been a mixed bag. So we have some suppliers that are still at a 92% fill rate. Okay, that's a domestic manufacturer, which has been interrupted, but it's been that's been extremely favorable. You can read a lot of articles. There's a lot of information out there that says, you know, mid 2022 is kind of where that could potentially be. I still stand at the point of communication. What is your game plan? Let's say you are in a pinch. You're one of those manufacturers or manufacturing reps that is in a pinch on a lot of products. What's the game plan to get out of it, right? Tell me it's July of 2022. That's great. As long as we've got a game plan in place and we're comfortable with that, then we can communicate that to the customer. The ones that have been tough are the ones where you don't necessarily feel that there's a game plan in place. It's more of the, oh, we'll wait and see. I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. That helps John and I assess our supply chain, right? One of the things that, you know, over my 16 years in distribution is that I've been faced with these types of situations now 4 times. You know, this isn't, the pandemic is obviously very different, but supply chain delays are not new, right? So to assess your supply chain now is a huge benefit. And then what are you going to do, or what are you going to change for the future? Because the likelihood of another supply chain delay happening, it's going to happen in my opinion. So having a game plan ready for when this is going to happen is in my opinion can be critical.
Yeah, and Patrick mentioned something earlier on a previous question, that curiosity. So Kyle, my background is in software engineering. So a lot of the lens that I see the distribution and supply chain landscape through is through that skill set. So I think a lot about the variables and understanding the variables and how they inform the constraints, so that to Patrick's point, we can properly communicate to the customer, but on the back side of things, so that we can also understand, like, how do we work within the realistic constraints, and how do we sort of break outside of those constraints, and that's where the sort of innovation becomes important on our end, to think, you know, outside the box. As cliche as that is, we need to clearly define what the box is and understand it very, very well.
Was there any hesitation to throw in with the commercial market with these days? Seem to be a little more, not quite sure how many people are going to go back to the offices. It seems to be a market that is in a little bit of flux. Was it any trepidation when you launched?
You know what's interesting? I can speak to that very well. So we're in a startup scenario, of course. Working on getting our facility right now. What's happening is that the light commercial market in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area for warehouse space is very tight. You can throw a rock and hit an open office space because of what you had mentioned. But in terms of what's happening, the secular shift towards people being perhaps remote at home more, the money that's been infused into the consumer's pockets, that means that businesses on a more macro scale are shifting to a model of we'll deliver goods to you. In order to deliver those goods to you, we have to have a space for the goods. It doesn't just impact the personal side. It of course has ramifications throughout the entire supply chain. And so on the real estate side, it's very tight in one area, and yet in another area, it's an awful market. So it's been very interesting to walk down that path and come to understand how the supply chain has impacted our business, but not just our business, sort of the entirety of business and consumer life. And that's very evident in trying to nail down a deal on a space.
Okay, that's interesting. And then when you launch the company, like you say, kind of a startup, how do you get contractors that have been with other distributors to kind of come over to you? I'm assuming those are, you're breaking up, long-standing relationships, so you have to offer them something better than what they're getting, right?
Yeah, that's correct. The one thing that John and I were doing prior to Liberty Supply is we were assessing the industry as a whole, specifically in our own backyard. So I came from an industry that was stagnant, didn't have a lot of change over about a 30-year period. And in this case, the one thing that is happening is there's an annuity out there, and I'll talk about that locally. I don't want to speak to other regions, but there's an annuity out there that, yeah, you have been our customer for 30 years. You'll always come back, right? We have a stance where we have to earn business every day, right? And that can be through a multitude of different things. Let's say at the worst, it's competitive pricing, right? But at the best, we've figured out a pain or a solution that really helps them become more efficient, or something that can really drive success towards them, okay? So it's more of these like fact-finding missions, right? Is kind of the way that I look at it, is I don't go in with a specific product or a specific thing when we go meet with these companies. It's more of, tell me about you. I want to know as much as I can about you. And then from there, we'll see if there's a fit, a solution, something that Liberty Supply can bring to the table that will help them, right? The last thing I want to do is get down to a point where it's a race to the bottom on pricing. That's just not who we are. We think that we are a value provider, somebody that can help interrupt this industry by not being stagnant and expecting our customers to be with us for 30 years, but earning it every single day.
Was it tougher during COVID? Because it's a little different now with the things opening up and vaccines and that, but you were trying to build relationships probably at a time when people didn't want to see people in person or shake hands with each other, right? Did that make it a little tougher?
I would say yes and no. So the yes part of it is, for me, I'm a traditional sales guy, and that is in front of people, a group of people in the same room. But also, no, optimistically was doing what we're doing here, right? Is connecting through some sort of media to be able to still have those conversations. You did have to push harder, there's no doubt about it. And you have to be very cognizant of everyone's feelings, right? There may be some people who are very open for you to come in and meet with them and have those discussions, and then others that aren't. So being respectful was certainly a huge part of it. But we did not want to lose traction or sight that we had value to bring, right? So yes and no, I would say.
Yeah, and again, I'll reiterate the fact that we're dealing, at least again in this region, with a highly reactive model, and we're trying to be much more on the proactive side. So it's certainly something that, from a differentiation aspect, we want to be speaking to customers. That doesn't have to be face to face, but the reason that we want to be speaking to them is to understand their problems, so that we can come to understand what their replenishment cycles are, what their key projects are that are upcoming, what the biggest pain points that they're seeing as an organization are. And every customer is different, every single one. You cannot bucket a given cohort with another given cohort just because they fall under this is a university bucket, or this is a government bucket, or this is a mechanical contractor bucket. They all operate differently. So understanding at a very deep level how they operate their business is where we can come into play to develop solutions and understand that how we provide value. So,
no, that makes sense. Also wanted to drill down a little bit with the e-commerce portion of it. Obviously that's growing, and not just in HVAC, but every facet of the economy. How big of a part is that in your business? How big of a part do you see that in HVAC, and kind of where do you see it going? I know a very big question, but
oh, that's a great question. That's one that I'm very happy to answer. So as I mentioned, my background is in software engineering, specifically in e-commerce. I perhaps have a contrarian view on e-commerce, especially sitting in front of a code editor for the majority of my career. Digital transformation is not an or, it's an and. If you're an organization and you recognize that we're not good on digital, the key isn't to shift to digital, it's to augment with digital. This is about a reduction in friction to enhance the user experience. That's what it is. There is no search box in our space that's going to answer the deep, complicated infrastructure and product application questions that a customer will have. Is it easier for them when they're leaving a job site at 7 at night and they need to order materials for the next day? Yes, of course. That's the exact use case. That's a great use case where e-commerce will reduce friction. Is it nice to be able to check stock and availability? Of course, those are areas where it's very, very strong. That's leveraging technology to increase the ability for humans to deliver value. That's where this whole picture of digital transformation, whether it's leveraging machine learning or artificial intelligence, the goal is to increase the value that's provided to the user. But in terms of inputs, like the outputs, the quality of the outputs in technology is reliant on the quality of the inputs. The quality of the inputs are defined by asking the right questions, by having a level of curiosity and intent to provide value. Given those inputs, technology can certainly be leveraged to yield exponentially more valuable outputs. But they work hand in hand. Technology is built, it's an exponential, it builds on the ability for human beings to develop relationships, to ask questions, and to increase the quality of inputs.
that's a good point, because sometimes I talk to our readers, they go, whoa, do you read the print magazine or do you read this on your computer or the phone? And yes is the answer, right? So as a business, you almost have to provide all things, because people are either going to go with one or the other, or to do a combination of all the above, right?
Right, and also, of course, and you that's touching on another point, is that technology increases the scale of discoverability, right? Like we know that all of us in our own personal lives, if we go out to we're researching something, we've met someone, we want to get an understanding in their company, that's where we're going. We're going online to learn more, and so in terms of discoverability, technology can aid a business like ours in defining, like, what is this company about? What is the value proposition of this company? And to be able to leverage the and scenario, it's this company has a great digital presence and they have an accountable human being or team of human beings behind the company.
To shift gears just a little bit to the hydronics market, any trend or two you're seeing out there that would be interesting to contractors in regards to your products in the hydronic market?
Sure. Yeah. It's funny that the mechanical and technology worlds are on a collision course. We're very much in the first inning of how technology can reduce energy consumption, increase the capacity for predictive, not preventative, predictive maintenance. So when we're looking at something like a pump, Some of the pump technology has been fairly stagnant over the past, it's been years. So what's changing to provide more value in those products is in fact the technology, is the fact that a pump can have a built-in variable frequency drive on it and not be a massive commercial pump, but be used in more sort of medium and light duty commercial applications. It can have a flow sensor inside of the pump so that it can alert a technician or whoever's a building stakeholder of, hey, there's potentially a problem here. In that technology, like in all things, the costs come down. So if you're a stakeholder in perhaps a light commercial facility, you may not have the funds to deploy a whole building management system. That's very, very expensive. But you can derive a lot of information just off of what a given piece of infrastructure can tell you, in this case, a pump. And the manufacturers are getting a lot better at understanding how technology plays a role in terms of energy consumption, predictive maintenance, informing the technicians of what the problems may be before they get to the job site so that they can have the proper materials. So yeah, a lot is definitely changing in the technology space and how it's interfacing with the mechanical world.
Yeah, it's I'll add on to that because the timing's so great. John and I were out at a trade show yesterday in person, and we were looking at some of those pumps. They had a trailer that was running live, and we were talking about, think about a contractor, right? And you've got an app on a phone that might have your customers' pumps throughout many different customers, right? The ability to communicate with those pumps and not have to be at the facility is unbelievably efficient. Like if I was a contractor, I'd be like, okay, this is amazing, right? You mean I don't actually have to drive over there to find out what's wrong with it potentially, and to be able to do the scan through the app? Seeing that trailer and then John and I just like brainstorming after the fact, it's pretty interesting where we are today and where we could be in the next 10 to 12 years.
Well, so like anything in technology, right? Once you see it and you have it, you can never go back. I'll date myself a little bit, but power windows in a car instead of rolling them up, like, well, you can never go back. It's kind of the same thing in every form of technology, right?
Yep. Yeah, so true. So true.
Are you guys, as you just launched not that long ago, are you farther along than you thought you're going to be? About where you're at? Was it a little bit tougher? Just kind of give me a lay of the land a little bit.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the progress that we've made. I think that when you're in any sort of startup scenario, one of the keys is focus. And what we're focused on is really developing the relationships with our customers and understanding where we can provide value. And when we do get a transaction, having back-end processes that really streamline the experience. We can't, as a distributor, we can't control the fact that a manufacturing line went down because of a global pandemic or a natural disaster or a strike or any given number of factors. But we can have very diligent processes in place to follow up, to be in constant communication, and then turn around and communicate to our customers, because they need to know where their stuff is, when's the expected delivery date. We have a number of cases where being proactive in that regard has really set us apart in a way that our customers